welcome everyone. Today's sensiLab forum presentation, we've got the pleasure of welcoming Craig James from the CSIRO. He's going to be talking about mixed reality techniques for remote management. And Craig's presentation will introduce an overview of ongoing projects of the Mine Processing Technology Group and the Remote Management Center, both at the CSIRO.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon everybody. I do apologise if I end up being a little bit rough at this stage. I've been presenting sort of in workshop this morning and I'm probably, timing wise, I'm probably a bit all over the place. I'll try to make sure I keep to time. I worked at CSIRO up in Brisbane. What I planned on doing in this particular talk over the half hour is just give you a very quick overview of where CSIRO and what we do, and then the group level, sort of what group I exist in, and then at the team level, sort of what we aim to do there as well. Finishing off with the lab that I operate up in Brisbane, and at the end of that, hopefully we'll pull out a few toys. I couldn't bring all of the gear here, so some of it's only sort of prop level, but hopefully give you a bit of an idea there too. So I won't try to get into too much detail with this, but just so that we've got context-wise, that's sort of stats about CSIRO. The main one here is probably just focused on, there's 9 sort of business unit areas that we've divided into these days. We go through, like any organisation, lots of different restructures and that sort of stuff. Yeah, lots of people, lots of commonality, but lots of different areas that are being worked on. Don't worry about that. This is sort of a general blur that we get with all of our stuff that we can have. That's the areas there. So I'm in energy, and these are the sort of the main areas that people are divided into, but there's also lots of support areas and so on. So we operate sort of some of the national infrastructure as well, like the Marine National Facility, which is the RV Investigator down Hobart, and also things like the square kilometre array that's being set up over, or our half of the square kilometre array that's being set up over in Western Australia. Those sort of things come with that as well. A couple of the things that CSIRO puts its hand up to sort of be known for, there's various things that have popped up over the years. One of the things, we're fortunate CSIRO's got a good brand, but not a lot of people actually know what we do. You guys, I think, you're working at various levels with CSIRO at different points, so you've probably got a much broader view of than the general public. I'm going to step right down though. Probably I should have said before this, in the energy group, there's 5 main programs. Coal mining, which is one I'm sort of nominally sort of under. Then we've got grids and energy efficiencies, there's low emissions technologies, offshore gas and onshore gas. Okay? Generally the push is around, look, how can we get the best out of what are we doing about our energy future? You saw that stuff recently in South Australia, sort of with what happened with the energy issues that they had. It was interesting, but at that point, I think the Twitter storm that started up from that, I don't know if many familiar, it was actually our CEO that was sort of got pulled into that conversation and was helping to educate sort of what was going on with the Australian market and stuff like that. And he was drawing on resources from the CSIRO Energy Group in Newcastle. So they were kind of right in the middle of that whole storm area. So that's pretty much in the coal mining research side of things. Even though coal is I guess has a perception of that, we're closing down coal-fired power stations, this sort of stuff, and we're looking to move into that sort of ultimate energy side of things. It's still very clear though, coal's a very, very big part of Australia's energy mix at this stage, and so it's very important that we still continue to do work around safety, productivity and sustainability to try and help manage that and unlock the better efficiencies and get a little more out of less that we're actually trying to use. The 2 major research groups we have, mine safety and environment, mine and processing technology. I'm in mine processing technology. That's more about the mine safety side of things, and they're definitely focused on sort of, I guess, doing geomechanical analysis, trying to work out where all the bodies are and also how to safely sort of extract it. Fracturing analysis, making sure that they're keeping an eye on with underground operations, how they can dig safely in those areas, get early warnings of various rock bursts and things like that happen. The environmental management side of things, that's about doing things like fugitive emission monitoring and capture, so trying to capture sort of fugitive methane that comes out of the coal, things like that. The operation side and that kind of things is also about optimisation and efficiency in sort of those operations. Okay, that's all of the stuff that they do. There is quite a lot of work done with 3D data and spatial sort of information, GIS systems, multi-dimensional data sets, and I get involved a little bit with these guys, but they do a lot of work with hyperspectral imaging, with stereophotogrammetry, building up sort of rapid maps and those sort of things as well. Down to the level of doing the analysis, but also down to the microscopy level. So it's quite important that actually you have a good view of the material that you're pulling out, has to be graded appropriately, and it sets coal prices, and it also sets what sort of emissions caps can be put on various uses of various materials and so on. Okay, in the mining technology group, we tend to look at the whole mining process from a level of human in the loop automation. So really what that means is in the three sort of general areas that you have to work towards: sensing, thinking and acting on what you're doing. It deals with things like building up an appropriate situational awareness, using that to actually make an appropriate decision, and then finally coming through and actually doing something in the environment itself. Typically you'll actually find people sort of at various levels of manual operation in this loop, depending on the area that you're in, so they're in the middle of that. Most of what we do is actually try to take people not out of the system, so we're actually more about trying to make things more efficient and try and enhance what people can do. And so it's really trying to just take the people and actually move them out of the dangerous environments. So those are the three drivers typically that we work towards: safety, productivity and sustainability. And that can be from an environmental perspective, and it can also be from a business perspective, on the efficiency side of things. So out of that, this is an example of some of the technologies and areas that we've tended to work in. For me, I'm more down in these two areas down here, which is sort of remote operations and human systems interaction, and sort of how that works in. And that's where certainly with virtual technologies, with augmented virtuality or augmented reality, or just purely virtual reality, really comes into play. But I interact with the other guys in our groups that work on the automation side of things and doing remote operations or remote supervision, and also help out with various things on the visualisation of various mapping technologies and so on. Alright, got research areas. I'm going to skip through a bit of this because some of that is probably to the side of the buy. It's about capabilities and so on. Examples of this was one of our remote operation systems for a remote ship loader, which had LiDAR and radar data, scanning the iron ore body, so getting put, like the iron ore getting put into ship loading. Sort of some of the design, the human systems design. Probably worth a mention some of the work that we do with underground inertial navigation. So we've had some of the probably really high success of doing underground tracking of various equipment. And that's really about trying to, before you can actually automate the gear and move people away, you actually have to really locate where it is. Underground provides its own particular challenges because, well, there's no GPS. Surveys, not really, you can't really do surveys very easily. And you also, equipment like this has to essentially sit inside these massive great flame proofs just to make sure that you're not going to blow people up. So it really does provide a big challenge with actually trying to track this stuff. That's one of the systems we did with remotely operating ship loader I mentioned. This is a big bottleneck underground is roadway development using these machines. This is called a continuous miner. Been working on automating various elements of this. And there's various aspects of that. This is from an imaging analysis and imaging perspective. This was one of the projects that's worked on recently using radar systems underground for when helping people to escape in emergency situations. Often what happens when an emergency happens underground, they have all these bags of rock dust sort of around the place hanging up, and so they actually explode when big winds or big violent sort of winds pass through, just to try and damp down the atmosphere. But it makes it very, very hard for people to escape. You can't see your hand in front of your face. Driving a car through that is really quite tricky as well. So this one actually sets a device on the steering wheel, and ultimately we're actually going to put some sort of head-mounted sort of information there as well, help people guide themselves down these roadways at speed. This was using LiDARs to scan coal trains when they come in. They have this situation called hang-ups. Coal gets quite sticky and if it hangs up in the wagon, it can actually cause a problem where it can contaminate, as it goes out, it can contaminate the rail beds, it can go into the rail beds and you can have them overturning, tipping over, which is really quite dangerous, but also contaminating various product levels and stuff like that. So we put systems in to be able to monitor that, and we got involved in that because there was scanning data, processing data, sort of a little bit of machine learning in that as well. Won't get into that one. Proximity detection, won't get into that one. Stockpile optimization, not so much. This one's probably of more interest, modelling stockpiles, being able to shift this material around effectively, so it's an optimization problem, but also visualization. Cold grain analysis I mentioned at the micro level, they do quite a lot of image processing work in this, which for me as a 3D visualization probably doesn't have as much interest, but these guys actually do quite a lot of great work there. That's another automation. That's a high level analysis system, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that one. And this one's actually somewhat interesting as well. So we've got here, just get back on the stopwatch. This is a system that we put on a UAV that does gas analysis using laser interferometry. The UAV flies off into the cloud, into gas clouds and things like that, and then we can determine using hyperspectral sort of imaging and so on as well the laser interferometry in this case, to work out what the structure of that cloud is, so then visualising it. Sorry, that's a different one. This one's using thermal imaging on UAVs to do subsurface detection of combustion. So once you've gone through coal workings to try and recover that environment, the only thing you can really do with spontaneous combustion at the moment is just keep digging it out until it stops burning. And this is sort of something that happens fairly naturally anyway. Scattered around the country, you'll generally have things called burning mountain, things like that, and that's really coal deposits that are close to the surface. Just as soon as you mix oxygen in there, you'll get spontaneous combustion. It means that you can't build on these areas, they're quite dangerous to walk across, you have emission of gas that you want to try and cut down, so you really have to try and reclaim this. It's a very laborious process to go through and try and reclaim. Using thermal imaging, of course, you can actually narrow down very quickly where the heat is still on the ground and target those sort of reclamation works. From a visualisation perspective, we just get involved to help them to visualise that more appropriately and help sort of towards guiding things. What have we got there? Don't worry about that one. Don't worry about that one. That's actually, just to add a bit of flavour, this is mines rescue. So once an accident does occur underground, trying to get something into that area can be problematic. So drilling a hole down to a tunnel can be one of the best ways of obviously getting air to track miners and things like that. But then building up information of what's going on can be quite tricky. So this system was designed for using a dirigible. So basically it collapses up, can go down a mine shaft, however big, and then when it's down there it can blow itself back up again, and then you can use that to sort of float around. That was sort of the push behind it. Not much in the way of visualisation of that, but from a remote operation perspective that can be useful. Sensors wise, we deal with a range of different sensors. Ground penetrating radar is of course of particular interest, principally for guiding equipment, but also for scanning for subsurface bodies and things like that. That's stretched across into a range of different domains, so the guys have used that, I think, for also scanning for root grubs, I think, in grape crops, which is quite interesting. I think there was also borers in wood plantations and things like that. So analysing that data and being able to extract it appropriately can be quite tricky. We've got a couple of fairly good guys who are focusing on that area. Getting down to where I got to, and I'm looking through this actually a lot quicker than I thought. This is my lab. It's the Remote Management Centre. This is based at QCAT in Brisbane. Encourage you, if you ever happen to be up in around Brisbane, it takes just as long to get out to Bullingvale as it does to get into the city from the airport, and we're about twice the distance, so very easy to get to us. On site at QCAT, we've got both our energy group Minerals, which is now called Mining 3 as well, and Data 61. We've all got a big presence there. Data 61 do cybernetics, so they kind of our yang to our yin, or the other way around. We have automation on one side, robotics on the other. We tend to sort of work towards similar goals. In the centre, nothing spectacular compared to the sort of technologies and so on. It's very similar, large format displays, multifunction screens, dome displays, surround sounds and so on. My lab fits in this room, so it's not exactly, I don't have a whole floor of stuff that, the cool stuff that you guys can have a play with as well. That said, it's a very visual lab, so usually visitors are coming to QCAT or leaving QCAT. It's the first or the last thing they tend to see. So I get about 350 visitors a year, about 100 different organisations. It's about a mix of business and industry and academic and government groups. We also get a lot of public that sort of come through on various different sessions that we keep coming through as well. I guess the sort of capabilities, skill sets that we tend to apply in there is using visualization, visual analytics, virtual and augmented reality, wearable computing, and I'll probably describe sort of one of the projects that we're playing with there. I don't have a lot of slides for that, but I do have some of the parts of the equipment that we have for there. I think that's probably it for that side. I don't know if I necessarily want to go through the rest of this. Let's just go right. Yep. Okay. So that's reached the end of that one. So just talk about maybe one of the systems that we've worked on in the recent past. Just give you a bit of flavour to the sort of things we do. It's just not going to do what I want here. And if it's of any interest, the reason I'm down in Melbourne at the moment is we've been doing 11 workshops in 8 locations across the eastern and southern seaboard, just to help educate and do outreach to SMEs around augmented and virtual reality technologies. So I won't go through all of this. This would be not telling you anything you don't already know, except to say that it's been interesting with the different workshops we've been doing. We've had pretty good feedback from those that know VR and work in VR and those that don't. They tend to have had a reasonably good view of sort of where we've tried to bust through a little bit of the hype about where the AR and VR technologies are. But what's become really apparent as well is that there is just so much work going on in Australia, and it's all disconnected. So it's really great coming in and having a chat to you guys and sort of finding out and seeing what you do. We've got a fantastic opportunity in Australia with the high level of technology uptake that we do have, and our position in the global and international markets. But there is, as you guys would well know as well, there's so much that's going on in the US and so much that's going on in China and Taiwan. We run the risk, of course, of getting that sort of running through very, very quickly. So that's that message that I've been basically getting out to people, particularly that it isn't new technologies and that it's been really that the technologies are here and that industry can certainly take hold of it. And that's my particular focus up there is really on that industrial use of AR and VR. To that end, I guess this is an example of one of those. In fact, I'll just look through so I can get to the, and look, I can cover some of this a bit later if you're really interested, but I'm sure you aren't. Well, in terms of, look, really briefly, just so you got the message coming through. Essentially, I'll just try and introduce it. It's been around for a while. 1960, that's Mort Hellig's system, which was a Sensorama. That's Ivan Sutherland's AR system that was developed in 1963. So, the two key VR and AR systems that coined the phrases. Talked a bit about, the mixed messages from the media. Started to talk to where we are on the hype curve. So the interesting thing, I guess, there is, anybody here not familiar with the Gartner hype curve? Put your hand up, please, if you're not. Okay. All right. Just really briefly, there's a market research company in the States called Gartner, and they watch various publications and various uses of technology and so on, and they track for when basically the technology trigger happens to when it reaches the peak of expectations, and then it really starts to die off. And this trough of disillusion is also called the valley of death when we talk about commercial levels. Unis, CSIRO, we all tend to work in this space here, and if we're really lucky, we get a little bit of this as well, and then we kind of partner with industry or spin out or whatever else, and you get that second wave of innovation happening. And this is, I guess this is really where the focus of innovation is though. So this is all, high technology and that sort of stuff, but it's really when you get to this point that you can actually start to apply the technology when it has an impact. That's really what innovation's about. And so if you can get on there early enough, then you get all the great investment returns and that sort of stuff.
And if you jump on later, then you really sort of have fun.
So VR technology, if you look at that over the last 10, 11 years, has followed this path. Augmented reality is a bit behind it, of course, but 2007 through to 2017, it's very much on its curve up. 2010 to 2011, that's Oculus Rift, Palmer Lucky, released around about this point. So it's really showing sort of where that second one is. Of course, 1960, 2007, it's a bit non-linear. The other interesting thing to note with this one is that's the first iPhone. Okay, so you could say the iPhone now is probably pretty much up here, and it would have been in 2007. It's down there. So 10 years of its development got it to that stage. Now VR now is around about here, and AR is pretty much just coming around this corner. Think about what's going to happen in that time and what time you're going to have. Now for the game side of it, that's already well underway, but it's business and industry, of course, that you guys are certainly well aware of that aspect. Look, I talked to reasons about like why mobile phone displays technologies, the cost, the Kickstarters being around, but also now thankfully now we know it's not making people as sick anymore, which is good. Then we've got augmented reality today. I just talked about the devices that are around. Again, sorry, I'll skip through these because I'm presuming there's a fairly high level of knowledge in the room about that. That's what I kind of wanted to point out. This is the system I'll show you today, which is a visual assist system. It's a near-eye augmented reality system, and it's used to do remote assistance. Okay, that's the commercial version, which was released at the beginning of this year. So I can talk to a few of the difference a little bit later. Various things about input devices, stuff that's coming, of course, wireless VR, the metas. I mean, the photo's already here, but it's going to be gaze detection, those sort of things coming a little bit more. Wearable kit, like smart glasses. I talked previously to the group about the Buzz XM100 versus the Google Glass, and social license to operate, why Google Glass had its real comeuppance, and I think they really lost the battle when they released a video, and I don't think I can really repeat it, of how not to be a glass something. But those of you that are probably aware of it know what that term was. Vuzix have actually done a pretty good job of targeting the industrial market first, which is where Google Glass, of course, will come back into. We're all waiting for WWDC. Let's see what Apple actually comes out with. Who knows? Suspicions-wise, the mobile phone space. If you're looking at what Google Tango are doing, it'd be really interesting to see what sort of sensor technology they actually are for. There are a lot of other mobile phone makers who are actually looking at that space and trying to figure out how can they make the most of their phone sensors. Haptic inputs, full body haptics, VOOs. That was the phone that I was trying, the camera that I was trying to remember. They're finally, I think, just about arrived. Stereo panoramic. Not that interested in the stereo part. As soon as you tilt your head, it's going to break it. But nice little compact camera that's actually hopefully going to be able to just do streaming and be very affordable. BLK360, you guys, has anybody got one? No? Okay. LiDAR plus camera, high resolution camera. It's in the States now, it's got 15,000. Hopefully it'll be out here more towards the end of the year. It's a combination of Leica and Autodesk targeted at the building information management side of things. We do a lot of work with LiDAR, handheld LiDAR in particular, but that's going to be a nice contained unit. Litro Emerge, light field cameras. Anybody here not familiar with light field cameras? That's probably something to leave for offline. Magic Leap, okay, that's probably at least a term that everybody will be familiar with. They're certainly pushing themselves back up the hype curve. Avogant are going to be much more interesting, I think, before these guys are. Social VR, I was just trying to point out to people that that's been a really very interesting push forward. Low-cost Windows 10 devices, the Creators update that's coming through or being steadily released out at the end of this parts of this year. And so the holographic interface for Windows, I think, is going to be really very interesting for us. Areas driving, sorry, I didn't mean to actually go into this in particular detail, but I've got the time for it. So, games, certainly, simulation and training. That's the iCinema in New South Wales. You guys, got any connections to? Yeah, that's good. So industrial design, and I talked to arts and media. Dear Angelica, if you haven't watched that one, I thoroughly recommend it. It's really very cool. Lots of media companies really have got plans and they've already pushed into these sort of spaces as well. Education we know well about, lots and lots of companies. I tried to indicate with this one about that even though there's a lot of hardware pushes there, there's still lots of opportunities for companies in Australia. Out of the 6 companies working on the wireless VR, one of them is based in Brisbane, so Immersive Robotics. And they're actually helping, we're all punching above our weight in that respect. Challenges, I mean, this is from an industrial perspective. I talked to, if the wheel were invented today, you'd still have to go through these stages to be accepted in industry. So you'd be well aware, acceptance in industry is really quite challenging. Technologies that are perceived as being new and flashy. The amount of times we've had people come into labs and look at all the large format displays and cave systems and domes and whatever, and then walk out and go, yep, well, that's all good, but it's not for us. And that's a really great thing about VR as well, is it's gotten to that point at the consumer level, it's really reachable for our customers and our clients. And that's the thing everybody's got to be watching out for. Digital disruption with this, and the really nice thing that I've been finding as I've been going around, there is a lot of awareness of these things, and all people asking those questions about, well, what are we going to do with augmented reality in our company, and how can we take advantage of it? So that message is really, it's gotten well out of the public space, which is great. I talked then to challenges of the design, of the content. If they didn't already have 3D content to begin with, this really seems to be a missing gap for a lot of companies when they want to say, well, we want to do something with AR and VR. Where do we go? How do we actually make stuff? And they're not really aware of the costs of actually generating 3D content. Falling back to panoramic video, certainly that's an option for them, but the limitations that you get with that, of course. LiDAR data certainly becoming much more present, but dealing with the data of that. Talked to a really interesting company, Fugro Roams in Brisbane. They do scanning of the power networks in Queensland, and they deal with 2.3 petabytes of data. They process it in the Amazon cloud, use machine learning on that, and then they send it over to China to do a bit of cleanup as well, and then they process it down. So within a 24-hour turnaround, when there's a cyclone, they can actually have after it's settled, they can have planes in the air, and then within a 24-hour turnaround, they can have information interjects about which lines are down, which vegetation hanging over the wires and stuff like that. That's a really, really cool use. And their browser, based on Unity, is amazing. Really good job done. I talked to the issue of pushing back up the hype curve and little jumps in between. It's so easy to get people excited when they get into VR, but having to pull them back a little bit and say, well, really got to think about that stuff, and not put the cart before the horse. It's not about the technology, so I really try and push the people that I've talked to think about the use cases they've got and really start to come and talk to people about, well, what questions don't they know? I don't know if you've seen the projections for augmented and virtual reality in the industries and so on. They vary a lot, of course, as you know. $150 billion from DigiCapital to $35 billion from Statistica. You unpack that a bit more. This is AR and VR hardware and software by 2020. This is software only, both AR and VR by 2025. So it's quite a variation between, but it's still quite a large industry. So lots of interesting things. Look, talking with opportunities, I talk about training and sort of stuff. You guys know very much about the sort of use cases involved and the sort of data, industrial design, collaborative design, various things about, that's again the guiding into a remote system. So finishing up, the marketing material for Magic Leap is very inspiring and all that sort of stuff, of course, but until they can actually deliver something that's small, lightweight, and lower cost and so on, it's hard not to take them with a grain of salt. But if they don't get there, Avigate might. I mean, the HoloLens in the next version of that may well have reasonable improvements. The Virgin's accommodation conflict is still going to be a real challenge for us, but hopefully it seems like we're putting a couple there. We've had that announcement recently from Oculus. We've had some work from NVIDIA about surface storage for holographic data. Really, lots of really interesting stuff going on. In that whole process where I start off from the messages from the media, I kind of lead people on this last little bit, which is, are you familiar with the work I do get this mixed up. I don't know if it's NIST or KIST in Japan. Sorry? It's K. Thank you very much. Clear air holography. Okay, so they can generate, and I haven't checked in recently, but last I looked, there were 150 coloured dots that are animated in clear air just by doing ionisation. They've moved from a machine that used to take up a room probably over the size of this room to they can now fit it inside a car. So they drive that to conventions and they open up the sunroof and they make the dots, which is really very cool. The really nice thing is they also integrated sensing for gestures, so that as you move your finger in the field, they change the field. Now for me, well, and you're pointing out to that, but that's not much of a step future-wise. We consider the 10-year time frame to that. I mean, maybe it's a bit of a step. All right. I mean, the Meta, their tagline is "Be the next Tony Stark," and you know whether their tracking system will get there or not. You know, it seems like there's a lot of problems there, but you know, this is going to be the Meta 2 is going to be the next version, and hopefully then they'll continue to improve and iterate on that. So maybe if you can picture Tony wearing a Meta 2 and being able to see something like that, that's kind of where I lead people with that. Now I think that's pretty much my time done. Thank you very much for that. I will do a shout out for Friday week. We're doing a VR hackathon in Brisbane. So I won't do a big sell job on that, just to let you know what's going on. And if you happen to be up for the Web 3D conference, which is the 22nd International Conference in Brisbane at QUT, this is just the weekend before that. Okay. So if you're up there, come a couple of days earlier, come out to the powerhouse. Hopefully it'll be a bit of fun. At the end of that, we'll be sort of very, very tired at the end of it. You'll find me sleeping somewhere in the QT in the Web 3D conference. Okay, no worries. I've got some stuff for at least to have a look at sort of, while we'll go through the talkie sessions and stuff.
Okay, thanks, Craig.
Two presentations in 30 minutes.
Any questions?
Questions? Yes.
So you said you've been doing this sort of roadshow.
Yeah.
Who are the sorts of people who come to it, and what are they doing? What are they interested in using?
Well, the reason that I've done it is actually, particularly with this piece of equipment, this is our pre-commercial version. I haven't got a version of the consumer release at this stage. To go from this to release out in the industry, we've joined with a commercializer called TAE, and we've had the fortune of getting a couple of back-to-back innovation connection grants. So if you're familiar with those, they're Oz Industry basically partner with a number of providers. CSIRO is one of those, but certainly universities works as well. It used to be called Research and Business, and the idea is the company does match funding up to after the 2 rounds, it's totaled $100,000 in order to do next stage developments. There's also various levels of funding, seed funding, industry innovation funding, and that sort of stuff available. Again, matched funding to do commercialisation technologies. Anyway, my local SME Connect, who's the team inside at CSIRO that helped with the team, approached me to say part of their KPIs is to do workshops for their SME networks, and I went sure, reaching out and just helping to get that message to industry that the technologies are available. And then he had his national team come up for a visit, and they all went, "That's a great idea. How about you can do more?" So instead of signing up for one, I ended up doing 11 workshops in 8 different locations, which, look, for me it's been good because getting out and actually talking to people has been fantastic. But it's been a bit of a mix. So it's been, sorry, I'm getting to 5 minutes of your question. A mix of both providers in AR and VR in the commercial space, and also users, and also academic and the research areas. So that's been anywhere from, today for instance, we had someone who does wiring looms, so a company that does wiring on buses, and I think they might also work on trains. And they want to be able to use augmented reality to enhance their workers' efficiency by providing better improvements rather than just having a screen in front of them running through videos of what to do. So much in the same way as the sort of work that Bruce Thomas does over in Adelaide. So trying to link them up at that stage. To other organisations like that are working in the health side of things, so using, there was one group yesterday that uses, or is planning to use, looking to use VR in paediatrics. So when you've got kids that are getting cannulas put in, things like that, trying to help calm them down, and this sort of things, and they know they've done a reasonable level of research in calming people and exciting people and that sort of stuff. There's another group, again on the medical side, doing pain management. So following up on that research that using VR, appropriate VR, can actually have a similar effect on the pain centres to heroin. So, morphine, sorry, not heroin. It's probably a good distinction. And potentially using them in combination with morphine to try and help people that aren't as open to their metabolics. It doesn't work, morphine doesn't work as well. Other industrial uses, all of that's sort of still, I'm coming to the end of these trips, so I haven't had a chance to catch up and write it all down, but there's been a good spread. There haven't been huge numbers. We've deliberately kept the workshop small. The largest one was yesterday, we had 25 people, but they've gone anywhere from, I think the first one was 3 people in Sydney. It was a really, really wet day, and Sydney traffic is not the best of times, so we didn't have a lot of people turn up. But that was actually a really good workshop session. They really engaged. So yeah, so far it's been Sydney, Canberra, Adelaide, Melbourne, it'll be Geelong tomorrow, and Brisbane, Newcastle. So I'd love to get over to Perth, but yeah, it's a 4-hour trip. So. Did that answer?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if you're aware of or involved with any industry projects actually using AR to do real work, and like having gotten beyond the proof of concept phase and actually using it.
Yep, definitely. That's probably.
This is probably the best example I've got of that.
Remote assistance system, wearable technology, so camera, near-eye display system, but then that's sent back to a central location or wherever, and then you annotate and gesture over the top of that with your hands, or objects, or digital information, or whatever, and sent back, of course. Now, it's not your traditional over-the-eye immersive AR, but it actually it uses the same principles. It's just near-eye display made a lot more sense because in industrial situations you need to keep your full situational awareness. Far too many glasses at the moment are way too, they block too much vision. Using near-eye display actually works in really nicely with the delay because you don't use it over your eyes while you're navigating because you end up with what I call the Robocop effect. Because you turn your head, you wait for it to catch up, and then you turn your body. And then you start looking on, which can be really very detrimental. The real challenge there is anything that we tend to work on, we try to be very careful that we don't change the way people work to fit the technology. There's some limitations, of course. You've got this, mind you, the real system is now about a third of the way to this. They've gone for a headband rather than built onto a cap, but we've also built on hard hats and stuff like that as well.
And that's used in which industry?
It started off in the mining industry, but this is being applied in the aviation maintenance industry. So early days for them, but generally speaking, they've had, and I've done quite a lot of outreach with things like this previously, and a range of different industries will express that. The two frustrating questions I've had with this over the years has been, when can we get it and how much is it? And I've partnered with a number of different demonstration systems and gone out and done them, and usually they've gone to that same point that they're waiting for a commercial off-the-shelf version that they can then run. So
Is HoloLens, in terms of hardware, is HoloLens getting close to that?
no, HoloLens. You've tried them?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. HoloLens, it's not industrialised, and if you've worn one for any length of time, I probably I've made the mistake of wearing one for over an hour at some point, and I think I've had to go into traction after that. No, not really, but it's still pretty heavy. It does still block your vision quite a bit. You can't really use it in high contrast lighting. Low contrast lighting. So if you go outside and it's full sunlight through, the tracking system really does struggle. That said, look, great technology. Really impressed with how they've kept it all in one unit, things like that. I'd love if they could do the battery separate though, because that's part of the weight, although the glass elements are certainly another part of the weight. Field of view for these, often that's the first thing that people tend to complain about. I can understand, but I know that will improve and get better. Add to that optical pass-through, whether it's either through these or through a Vario or other similar technologies. Given you're capturing what you're doing, sending it to someone, and then presenting back the same information, trying to mediate that over the top of what you're doing is not the right approach. Now, with the tracking on the HoloLens, at least you can put it up somewhere, you know, put the view up here, but then the field of view is so limited, it's well out of your field of view. So,
Yeah, we've also contrasted it with things like these are the M100s,
Wi-Fi 6, so smart glasses. And these are nice and light, and you know the display is actually quite crisp, pretty readable outside. But there's certain disadvantages that you get. One is, I mean, it's nice and light, but the battery is shockingly small. So using it for any length of time is really hard. So you have to tether it with the battery anyway. The other thing is using a monocular system really isn't that comfortable. So for small tasks, for microtransactions, these are good. Okay, so guidance, you know, or workflow, task lists, things like that. Or I want to pull it down and capture an image. That's great. But yeah, they've still got a way to go because the cognitive load they introduce for being able to, if I try and actually, here you go, pop that on. Actually, I'll put the video on for you, and you can pass this around because I think the battery is reasonably charged. There we go. All right. So now it's a bit dark in here, and you can probably I don't know how you'll go. You should be all right with glasses. So if you can look at me while you're doing that. All right. Now, if you were to try and maintain just say I was the task, you know, in the conversation with me, your eyes are doing this. Okay, you're hunting back and forth. Now, if you did that for any length of time, your eyes would get tired, you might get a headache, you might even get nausea. Okay, you can't use that in that sort of context. Now, if you want to look at the view instead, and it's on this eye, you do this. You know, so really trying to focus. You're also trying to set your eyes at different focal lengths. Okay, so yeah, you know, I certainly challenge you to have a go with that. They've got a really good place though. I think there's a really interesting path for these devices. The M300 that's come out now, its ergonomics a little bit better even again. You can also flip it at the side when you don't need it. Yeah, I've seen, I can't remember whether it wasn't Avigant, there was another one of the bazillion of glass manufacturers now that are sort of getting on board. But it pretty much summed it up in a video that they did where, and it's not the Bavaria, so I'll pick on those because I've got them at the moment. They're actually a pretty good display as well. They had a worker in warehousing, and he was driving a forklift, and he was driving the forklift, these sitting on his head. Okay, not these, but something similar to that bulk. And then he got out and he went to, he had to locate a package. So he popped them down like this, and then there was a bit of aspirational stuff in the video because they were doing personnel tracking, sort of following through that area. And it directed him towards the area. He picked up the package, scanned it, and then he put these back up like this, and he walked back to his forklift, and then he drove off. Okay. Now, it's really pointing to that the devices just aren't usable to that level. These ones for the warehouse tracking side, as long as you can put it up out of the way, getting it in place, scanning it, and then going out is still better than fumbling it for your phone or a handheld device, you know, bringing it out, scanning it, doing whatever there, getting your information you might need or where it's to go to, popping it back in, instantly forgetting that you've actually got to take it, and then sort of running off and doing what you need to do. So really, microtransactions wise, these are. Did that answer?
Yeah, but I think that's probably not AR. It's more, both of these other devices really aren't AR. They're more, well, actually,
yeah. Well, when you talk about AR, it depends on how you mediate or what you're overlaying. So again, if you're overlaying it in place, yep, that's where HoloLens and these devices, even with the video pass-through, augmented reality, that's still quite usable. And Google Glass, of course, does that through an optical pass-through instead, but they don't sense the environment. Now, that's where it gets hung up in this thing of, well, what's augmented reality versus what Microsoft called mixed reality versus, sensing the environment and so on.
Or just in your own display.
Or just in your own display, that's right. For me, I mean, if you look back at the scale established in 1993, not back at the beginning, I think it was Milligan. I think my thumb's going to wear out before I get back. Yeah. Maybe I should actually just stop this. Jump back.
mixed reality really covers, it doesn't really cover the sensing of the environment per se. There's the presumption that augmented reality is referenced to the environment, okay? But Microsoft have sort of hijacked the mixed reality term to sort of differentiate themselves from devices like this that only really overlay various bits of information. But that we're probably going to have to look towards the IEEE Standards Association starting up, discussing sort of what they've set up a working group about trying to establish IEEE standards for the naming. Safe to say in the public space, they look at anything like this and that and whether that's augmented reality thing. Actually doing what I think you're asking for, which is the in-place sensor training, is probably one of the ones I've seen most. We haven't done that ourselves, but most of the successful ones I've seen so far have either used fiduciary markers, just have that in view, or if you look at things like the daiquiri helmet, you know, they're having to construct the content specific to the environment. So it's not so much using appropriate object recognition and then you know, trying to interpret that and put semantic reasoning in there to attach information to it. It's more about here's some pre-prepared content we've got, now we've matched it to this object that you're going to be working on and then show you through. I think there's work being done around that area, but I haven't really followed that. So.
You mentioned the mixed mode is the interesting one as well for me. Sound,
Yep.
how much have you looked at that in terms of?
Personally, not a lot, although I've wanted to take opportunities to black people out or put them in a dark room and use sound to be able to sort of walk around and stuff. I've seen stuff, or I've read stuff done in those areas.
So is
I
the
will have one
market,
to-
sorry, is the customer acceptance, is the research, where would that be on the curve in
in
terms
terms
of
of
sound?
customer acceptance.
Because we've got a couple of people
Yeah.
who've said visual augmented is really nice, but in practice there's a whole class of people who would much rather have instructions coming into their ears.
Yeah. Now that's true because you have modalities that you probably now you can either be visual, oral,
Yeah.
kinesthetic, or I don't know if you really taste or smell. And whenever you're describing someone to something to someone, you can hit that block of I could be talking to you and blue in the face, but then if I draw a picture for you,
Yeah.
get it, or give you something to play with. So you did right. There is actually a company that does, now that I remember, that does augmented reality sound. I do recall we had one contact at some point, and I don't know where that's gone, where they have a pair of smart headphones, but they track in space to use spatial audio. And at the time when I was thinking about it, or in the initial conversation, I was kind of like, really? But it does actually have a pretty good application that way. Certainly for navigation in hazardous environments, when you're in industrial spaces and you have moving equipment, having a warning well before it gets to you and a spatial awareness of that, I think would work actually really well.
There's the Jabla headphones, I think they're called, and then there's these Ossics coming out.
OSIC, I think, is the one that we've had some limited contact with in the past. And I think the conversation went, we should do something there. And it was kind of and then we'll see.
Well, that exists.
On the audio side of things, in VR certainly as well, it makes a huge difference. We're building content for, we've got our SciComm review, Science Committee review next year for energy. This is every 4 or 5 years. So it opens up books, we get in external science and industry representatives to look at everything we do and say, yes, no, yes, whatever. And then we have to kind of react to that. What we typically do is we lock the people in a room for 3 days and then subject them to death by PowerPoint. And hope that some of it sticks and they can go, yep, that's really good, and yeah, this is really good. So, my acting energy director last year, Carla Rivas, sort of came by the lab, and we had some of our LiDAR data for our underground scanners that we use set up in VR, and he got really excited. He loves technology, so it was really good to get him. It's easy to get him excited, which is great. And I think it was 1 week before the end of the financial year, and he asked the question, okay, so how much are the systems? And I said, well, to get a Vive and a PC to drive it, and they pull it out of the air, probably about $5,000. And he said, great, get 5
5 of them in the next week. And I was like, okay. Anyway, so it was really, what he wanted to do was he wanted to shape these sessions up, and out of the 5 program groups, develop a VR experience so that you can basically go do all the death by PowerPoint, wake them up by putting them in VR and actually show them, get them to use their spatial memory, their name bucks, essentially use multimodal learning to try and get more of the message across, so then they could go back into their review session and actually make better advice. So thankfully, that was originally going to be March this year. That got delayed to March next year, which was good because I got a Christmas. So we're actually kicking back into gear with that now. I've got a couple of scenes ready, but there's still lots to do. And sound on that certainly going to be really interesting.
And the other one in that area is haptic,
Yes.
connected to that, because I saw I read an article where somebody used Google Glass to teach people Morse code by playing a game.
Good.
And they didn't realise they were actually being taught Morse code, and it was basically haptic against Society of Skull was teaching. Is that something that's happening?
I don't do something direct, but there's a lot of work going on in haptics. I'm waiting for, hanging out for the Dexmo and the Glove One, and there's a nice Kickstarter that happened about a month ago. I can't remember the name of it, where they're doing the same job as the Dexmo, which is an exoskeleton glove to give force feedback. The Glove One, they're going to be really interesting because they're going to have they won't have force feedback, but they'll have pressure feedback and heat in a flexure tracking glove that will be $500 they're estimating, as opposed to the who have we got? We've got a couple of other flexure gloves that are about 5,000 each. They're really just too expensive for it. Well, now, then they would certainly let them up. Yep.
Have you tried the Meta 2, or do you have it here?
No, I don't have the Meta 2. I've been hanging out. Have you tried the Meta 2?
We ordered it, but it's not there.
Yeah,
Because
same.
apparently, as you said, it's supposed to be the next big
Yeah,
step.
90-degree field of view is going to be fantastic. Although you'll look like
And
a duck.
also the depth map race, that's
Well,
also a huge difference.
Yeah, I've read mixed reports at the moment, and I'm a bit hopeful. It's going to be early days, and they're still talking about it being a developer kit. So they're trying to set our expectations. Did you get the Meta 1?
No.
Yeah, you're lucky. I went on the Kickstarter, and I got this fantastic looking box. It had, I kid you not, it had red velvet cover. I pulled that off, and I'm thinking, well, this is pretty good. And then all I found was it was an Epson BT100, so the chunky version of this. They'd taken this and they'd stripped it out, and they'd put a HDMI converter in there. So, and I was rather disappointed. The software was awful. Their registration process was just
Yeah, they have a
totally
pretty good reputation, but apparently their new device is real.
It does look good. I've had reports that their tracking system is still quite a bit flaky.
Yeah.
So its update rate and its latency is still quite bad.
So,
But it's a developer kit.
so what is your, if you had to pick like the best experience you had with the device, which would be like the best? Like the HoloLens is by far the.
If you're talking augmented reality,
Yeah, that's great.
look, yes, the HoloLens, but still firmly in the mind that it is a developer kit. And I'm cautious. It's got wow moments, showing people and stuff like that, but I'm cautious when showing to industrial people with industrial interests to show it too much, because it's that shiny object bit. That kind of it's the risk of those expectations starting to shoot back up again and push back up the hype curve, because it isn't suitable for industrial environments. It is just, from ergonomics, it's far too heavy. People can't wear it for any length of time. From industrial design perspective, yes, desktop experience, work on your PC. I want to see it now in 3D, stick it on, do processes and that. It's got some really good stuff there. From a research perspective, looking at collaborative, the work they've done to have them collaborate together, I think is really very interesting as well. But it is terribly limited in terms of the content that you can put on there, and harks back to spending time in the games industry trying to optimise things down to a point where, with the Vive and the Rift and whatever, I can just throw stuff at it, and generally speaking, it works okay. And that's running at equivalent of 180 frames a second. When I stick stuff on a HoloLens, you've really got to think. And if I start with content that is this big, it takes a lot of effort to actually pull it down to a point where I can actually use it appropriately on there.
show you some of that because you'll note that when you get into it that it drops well below 50 frames a second.
Yeah.
So, but fantastic job on what they've done, and I'm really keen to see where they decide to what things they focus on for the 2019 release. So that's when they're aiming for their consumer release. But if I could have a pick, Avogard sound really good at the moment. So they've got the Glyph, which is the funky VR headphones. You've seen those? So they're just headphones, and they've got a DLP display system in the headband. It looks really uncomfortable though. I hope it doesn't have any cushioning. It's just it's cans on your head. You pull it down, basically look through. And its resolution colour presentation so is apparently really, really good. I've tried it myself. But it was a bit of a weird idea. But their next display system is pushing into using light field technology to be able to present, to address the emergence accommodation. So really interested to see that. Okay. Other questions? Yes?
I usually use kind of 3D60 camera. So do you see the kind of future of the 3D60 video or something? Because when I work, I could see a lot of limitation in terms of like
Which cameras do you use?
like a lot of things, GoPro and also like ZRS or like Hoda, whatever, like Nikon stuff. So, but like I could see a lot of limitation of moving camera and also settings problem and also like interaction, immersion, embodiment, navigation, whatever. So it's kind
Certainly a couple of issues I'd share as well.
Yeah,
where,
right.
Passive experience, so you have to be in place. Any motion, getting out into that, really a problem. The depth of field, certainly losing on that. But it depends on what scale you're looking at. I mean, 3D stereopsis only works out to about 10 to 15 metres.
Yeah, right.
So if you're focusing out beyond that, it's not a problem. Resolution is the biggest thing for me. And in order for phone-based VR, cameras like the Gear 360 and stuff like that, fine. But you put them up on immersive VR and they're rubbish. They're really quite horrible. They're going to have a 4K version coming out. I mean, I'd be really keen to see what the Aura is going to actually, or the resolution of the Aura, what it's capable of. But real-time capture of high resolution is still a bit of a problem. There is a camera coming out at the end of this year, hopefully again. It's already been on pre-release, but they're all gone. It's called the Bubble, BL. It's also a 4-camera panoptic system. Panoptic system. And it's looking like it'll be real-time streaming, high resolution, whatever else. The depth thing is another interesting push by, I think Facebook released a bit of technology where they play with, I don't know whether it's structure from motion or they do some level of recognition, and they can do some level of separation for things that are in foreground and the background, and they do the trick of they blow it up slightly.
Is it through a stereoscopic lens? Kind
well,
of like
there is that, I mentioned the VUs, they've been another case like the Meta, they've been absolutely ages to get out, but to me, the interest I've got in it more is the fact that it'll be a 4K camera, because the stereoscopic there, I mean, as soon as you turn it like this, it's gone. So it'll be interesting though. But I have to say that I've had some really great, interesting experiences in 360 immersive video. The Cirque du Soleil stuff, that's brilliant. Being up on the stage, and thankfully I'm not scared of clowns, having them run at you and sit beside you. And then, but I've had people sitting in it, and then they're watching all the stuff that's happening out here, and then they happen to turn to the side and there's a clown sitting there going, so it's really quite fun.
With the fancy pants lighter combo,
That one.
can you sort of do the then overlay depth in real time?
Yeah, that ends up being, rather than rendering a flat image, a bubble, you're actually rendering geometry. Now, point clouds are a bit tricky to actually visualise properly. The real advantage of using it in immersive though, as opposed to on your screen, is you have parallax. And if you can use things like EDL lighting, IDOM lighting, things like that, you can give some level of occlusion sort of around edges, and not occlusion, but shading around edges that help them stand out. And so you can actually wander around and stuff. But my biggest disadvantage with LiDAR at the moment is using VR, using Unity or Unreal. I use Unity quite a lot. And
still haven't yet found a decent point cloud renderer for large data sets, streaming data sets. The closest has been Figaro Rome's. Have you guys got one?
We're working on one.
Yeah. Look, I'm happy to collaborate on that. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to working on that once I get back and get a little bit more time over this next 6 months, because yeah, it's just painful. Figaro Rome's have got effectively a 2.5D large-scale streaming layout system, point cloud system. It's pretty reasonable, but for our purposes, we're not interested in surface map data. We need subsurface data, so that's not sufficient. Another one of interest though might be that the Nokia Ozo. You familiar with that one?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can hire these. You don't have to buy them. So they're 40,000 US. Buy them. They're resellers based in Melbourne. Though.
Oh,
So it might be interesting to say, loan us a system and we'll market it for you. I'm sure that you'll probably.
All right.
Okay. But look, I think there's pretty good future, particularly given that it's made easier and easier to do YouTube immersive VR videos. Getting out to the crowd, I think, is going to be important. One thing that's going to drive that a lot more is web VR. So Web 3D is really come a long way, but web VR is still very much its only. You'll find out more about that hopefully in the next. Well, I'll hopefully find out more too in the next 2 weeks at the Web 3D conference. We've got speakers out there talking to where it's gotten up to, and it's gotten to the point now where it's going to start to get integrated and released in the browsers, and that's going to be a real good tipping point over the next 2 years. Have we got any other ones? Okay, so what do we go time-wise? Oh, my watch has died. All right. 5 minutes over.